Zechariah, believe it or not. I've opened a can of worms that I'm really trying to close. We're in Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9, and this is the problem. This is the promise that we are tracking down right now. Reading a book, the Bible, that God, over and over in this Bible, He makes His promises, and then He says, watch me fulfill them. And when I fulfill them, one after another, after another, after another, your trust in me, your confidence in me will be built up and up and up. And so that's what we're doing. We're looking at the promises of God. And we're in the book of Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9. This is the promise that I chose. This is what we will see hopefully by the end of the night, if we can get there. This is the promise we will see come true in the New Testament. The book says, rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout in triumph, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. He is just and endowed with salvation, humble and mounted on a donkey, even on a colt, the foal of a donkey. And so Israel is given this promise, this prophetic promise about Messiah as the conquering king coming into Jerusalem one day, and Israel accepting him, or at least recognizing him as their king, the king of Israel. We'll see that Jesus does that. He doesn't take the throne as the king because the bulk of Israel, the mass of the Jews, rejected him as their king, as their Messiah, but he did this. And so we moved over to the book of Daniel because of a statement that Jesus made in the book of Luke concerning the times of the Gentiles. And this is the reason I've gone here. It says that your king is coming to you, Jerusalem. You should rejoice in that fact. And we know that that prophecy is fulfilled in the person of Jesus on what the church calls Palm Sunday. Jesus did come into Jerusalem. And certain of the Jews, a small portion of the remnant there in Jerusalem, did accept him as their king. So then why isn't Jesus seated as the king of Israel? Why isn't he enjoying his eternal dominion? Why isn't his kingdom started in Israel? Why isn't he sitting on David's throne? And that's because God also prophesied, mostly through the book of Daniel, through the prophet Daniel, that Jerusalem and Israel would be dominated by Gentiles, this period that we've looked at called the times of the Gentiles. We're still in the times of the Gentiles in the church. Israel is still being dominated by Gentile nations. In Daniel chapter 2, which is where we were last time, just a couple of verses to catch up, this is God speaking to Daniel through a dream to King Nebuchadnezzar, a Babylonian. God's going to get information to humans any way He sees fit. And this information He's given to Daniel and to the Jews that are in Babylon for that 70-year stay. God's giving them information about the future of the world. What will happen after these 70 years are completed? Will David have another king on the throne immediately? Daniel has all these questions throughout the book. Daniel chapter 2, Daniel chapter 7, chapter 8, chapter 9, Daniel chapter 12. He's always asking this question, trying to find out what's next for Israel. And so God answers him partly through this dream of Nebuchadnezzar. So this is how the dream goes very quickly. The king, Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king, most powerful man in the world at the moment, the king said to them, I had a dream, and my spirit is anxious to understand the dream. You drop all the way from there down to verse 28, and Daniel has decided or has been called upon by God to answer this dream. And so Daniel, giving all credit to God, taking none of the credit on himself, says to the king, however, king, there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. It's not me. I can't know what you dreamed. I can't give you the interpretation of your dream, but my God can. The God of Israel can. The God Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, He can make it known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will take place in the latter days. This is prophecy. This is an unveiling. It's like reading a history book, only the history hasn't been made yet. Humanity hasn't walked through these steps, but an omniscient God, a God who knows everything, says, I can reveal as much of my plan to you as I want to. And that's what he does in Daniel chapter 2 to Nebuchadnezzar. He unveils his plan. He writes a history book before it's occurred. This is what your dream, Daniel tells the king, this is what your dream and the visions in your mind while on the bed. We go a couple of verses later, and we start talking about the statue. Daniel is telling the king about his statue in the dream. He said, you, O king, were looking, and behold, there was a single great statue. That statue, which was large and of extraordinary splendor, was standing in front of you, and its appearance was awesome. And now he describes the statue in detail. Daniel, been given this information by God, is telling Nebuchadnezzar what he dreamed. He says the head of that statue was made of fine gold. Imagine Nebuchadnezzar, this Gentile king, this pagan king, while Daniel is telling him exactly what he dreamed. I mean, imagine that. If you told me, Rick, I had a dream, go no further. I know exactly what you dreamed. It's like Jesus telling Nathanael, I saw you when you were under the fig tree. Wow. Only God can do these things, and God is giving this information to Daniel. I bet Nebuchadnezzar's head was spinning. The head of that statue was made of fine gold, its breast and its arms of silver, its belly and its thighs of bronze, its legs of iron. Its feet were partly of iron and partly of clay. In Daniel chapter 2, verse 38, it says to Nebuchadnezzar, wherever the sons of men dwell, Daniel is telling Nebuchadnezzar, wherever the sons of men dwell, or the beasts of the field, or the birds of the sky, God has given them into your hand and has caused you to rule over them. You are the head of gold. And if Daniel would have stopped there, I'm sure Nebuchadnezzar would have made him second in command, and he would have been just a wonderful friend to the king. But Daniel doesn't stop. In Daniel chapter 2, verse 39, he says, after you. Nobody wants to hear those words, so you're saying my kingdom will come to an end. That's correct. Oh, so my son and my grandson, I'm going to start a dynasty that will last for 800 years? No, not quite. Listen to what he says. After you there will arise another kingdom. Not Nebuchadnezzar, not your name, not Babylonian. A new people will take over. There will arise another kingdom inferior to you, and then another third kingdom of bronze, which will rule over all the earth. And then there will be a fourth kingdom as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron crushes and shatters all things. So like iron that breaks in pieces, this fourth kingdom will crush all and break all these in pieces. And this is where we stopped last time. Nebuchadnezzar's statue dream, the interpretation of all these nations. Daniel says that there are 4 empires that are represented in Nebuchadnezzar's dream. 4, not 5. 4. The fourth one we'll talk about a little more tonight. But the first one, he just told Nebuchadnezzar, you are the head of gold, Babylon. The Babylonian Empire is the first empire in God's unveiling of the latter days to Daniel through Nebuchadnezzar. The second, the breast and the arms of silver. Notice I have 2 arms. This was a split kingdom. There were Medes that had power. There were Persians that had power. We call it the Medo-Persian Empire. 2 different groups of people came together for power. Ultimately, the Persians would prevail. And we would know this not as a Medo-Persian Empire, but the Persian Empire. But that's who this is. The breast and arms of silver are the Medes and the Persians. The belly and thighs of bronze he speaks of are the Greeks. The Greeks, Alexander the Great, all the rest of the Greek Empire. And after that, a fourth nation will arise. The legs of iron will be a fourth nation that just as much as iron crushes and shatters all things, this will be the empire of all empires. Nothing on earth has ever existed like the strength of the Roman Empire behind the Roman legions. Nothing on earth has ever existed like Rome. The legs of iron will crush and break all these into pieces. These are all Gentile nations. So you have to ask the question again, but what about Jesus? What about Messiah? How do the Jewish prophecies of a coming king, how does the prophecy of Isaiah 53 that the suffering servant would come, how do those prophecies tie in with these prophecies? These are all Gentile nations. So what is it about Messiah, and how does Messiah, how is he included in all of these things, or is he? These are all the questions we have to ask of the text when we read Daniel. What about Israel? The question is, what about the Jewish people? The answers are all Gentile nation, Gentile empire, Gentile empire, Gentile empire, and Daniel's asking the question about, hey, our 70 years is up, Yahweh, what comes next? And his answer is always Gentile, 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 Gentile. Where are Israel and Jerusalem on this list? The question is, or the answer is, they are not. They're not on this list. These are Jews that are dominated until Rome comes. And I hate to go here because I don't know how to say it actually, to be biblically factual. And this is very difficult. You hate to get into the what ifs, and I'm not going to very deeply, but what if, we're there now, what if the Jews would have accepted Jesus as the Messiah? Would these things have all still come true? Now think about your history, think about your timeline. This is a prophecy in the Bible, and if it doesn't come true exactly the way God rolled it out to Daniel through the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, if these things don't all come true, then God's not a promise keeper. He's not truthful. You said something would occur that didn't. But in Daniel's dream, or Nebuchadnezzar's dream here, did the Babylonians exist? Yes is the answer. What about the Medo-Persians, the breast and arms of silver? Were they a human historical empire? Yes, they were. What about the Greeks? Well, of course they were. What about the Romans? Yes, they were. When did Jesus come to earth? Who was in power when Jesus came? I asked this question last week. The Romans were. So even if the Jews would have accepted Jesus as their king, and they had every opportunity to, this prophecy, this statue, what we are talking about here, this domination by Gentile nations would still be perfectly true. All these things occurred before Jesus ever came to earth. But where is Israel? Where is Israel on the list? Look what it says. Before we answer that question, let's talk a little bit about this fourth empire. This is the Pandora's box I've opened. That I got all my weight on the lid trying to slam it back down. In Daniel chapter 2, verse 41, just a little bit. Let's talk about it. In those days, or in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed. And that kingdom will not be left for another people. It will crush and put an end to all these kingdoms, but it will itself endure forever. Now, let me ask you, has that occurred? That kingdom which will never be destroyed, that kingdom which will not be left to another. See, all these other kingdoms were left to someone else. The Medo-Persians taken over by Greece, the Greeks taken over by the Romans. Everything they worked for was taken over by the Romans. One day that will not happen again, but it hasn't occurred yet. I'll say a couple things about these kingdoms. The three kingdoms, the first three kingdoms of Nebuchadnezzar's dream, the Babylonians, the Medo-Persians, and the Greeks, have already run their course in history. Dead and gone. They're done. They had their day. God appointed their time. God appointed the breadth of their authority, and they are dead and gone. But this fourth kingdom that's spoken of here, another kingdom, the fourth kingdom as strong as iron, this Roman Empire kingdom, went from being the feet or the legs of iron, it morphed into being iron and clay mixed. Look at what it says there in the verse 40. It says, then there will be a fourth kingdom as strong as iron, and in the very end of it, it says, it will crush and break its... That's not where I'm at. Where am I? Oh, you know, I've done something wrong. Boy, my brain was trying to figure that out. So wait just a minute. Is this, what verse is this? This is what? This is 41? This is 44. That's a typo. Okay. Yeah, my notes are right. My slide is wrong. I want Daniel chapter 2, verse 41, which says this. My goodness, I thought I was losing my mind. In that you saw the feet and toes. Boy, this makes me feel much better. I need to take a drink. I was trying to work my way around that error. In that you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron. It will be a divided kingdom, but it will have in it the toughness of iron, inasmuch as you saw the iron mixed with common clay. There are all kinds of interpretations of this. Some people would say that the Roman Empire will be revived. They'll call this the revived Roman Empire, the 10 kings of the revived Roman Empire from Revelation. Others say that the Roman Empire never really died completely. And pick a side, it doesn't matter, and there are dozens of other sides. As a historian, I would say that the Roman Empire never really died entirely. And this is why. The Roman Empire was never defeated by an enemy, like these other kingdoms were. The Roman Empire imploded from the inside out. It wasn't taken over by anyone. You didn't have Rome fall and America take over Rome's authority. It didn't happen like that. Rome just killed itself with its with all the ungodliness of Rome. It decided, or it disintegrated from inside. There was no historical enemy that destroyed the Roman Empire. Another thing, you could easily make the argument, and I would make the argument, that European countries that still exist, like Italy and France and Great Britain and Spain and Germany, still hold to much of what the Roman Empire held to. The Roman laws are still, many of the laws are in effect. European laws, even American laws, were adopted off of Roman laws. Their law was excellent. There's books written on Roman law. The language of the Romans, which was Latin, still lives on in languages like Spanish and French. You don't have Spanish and French if you don't have Latin. I'm just saying, I don't know that Rome was crushed and is gone. I think it still has a very, very weak heartbeat. Men have come along that have tried to revive the Roman Empire. Men like Francis Napoleon. It wouldn't have been a French Empire, but it would have been a bringing back up to the surface fully, breathing new life into this mostly dead corpse, the Roman Empire. Napoleon tried to do it, just wasn't a strong enough man to get it done. Mussolini tried to do it. What country is Mussolini from? He was Italian. He was Roman. Mussolini tried to do this, couldn't get it done. Hitler comes along, the German Hitler comes along, makes himself an ally to Mussolini, and they try to do it, and they couldn't get it done. But they tried to put back together the Roman Empire. They simply just couldn't do it. This European empire, and they just couldn't get it done. One day there will be a man who's able to put the Roman Empire, to give the Roman Empire, to put its feet back under it and stand it up. Who's that man? The Antichrist. One day the Antichrist will be able to do what Napoleon couldn't, what Mussolini couldn't, what Hitler couldn't do. One day God will allow a man to restore Rome to its full glory. A couple of verses concerning this Antichrist in Daniel as Pandora's box spreads open. In Daniel chapter 7, verse 8, because we're here and we're talking about this, I want to talk about it. We'll get out of it soon. I think it's wonderfully interesting, so I don't mind being here. In Daniel chapter 7, verse 8, I say one day God will allow a man to do this. A strong enough man to have universal domination and authority to put the Roman Empire back, to breathe new life into it. It's been tried to been done for thousands of years. For 1,000 years. It just has, the right man hasn't come along yet. He will come. In Daniel chapter 7, Daniel has a vision. Not Nebuchadnezzar, but Daniel himself is given a vision from God. He wakes up and needs the interpretation of the vision. It's being interpreted to him. In Daniel chapter 7, verse 8, it says, while I was contemplating the horns, 10 horns of this Roman Empire that's breathed new life, this European empire domination of the world. I'll show you a map in just a minute of how this looks today. But it says, while I was contemplating the horns, behold, another horn, a little one. This is Antichrist. He's called the beast. He's called Antichrist. He's called the little horn of Daniel chapter 7. There he is right there. Another horn, a little one, came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were pulled out by the roots before it. We've talked about this in the book of Revelation, where there is a 10-part division of the world, and 3 of these kings, 3 of the emperors of these 10 parts give up their power. They're overthrown by this little horn, by Antichrist. He takes over 3 of the divisions of the world, and behold, this horn, this man who will come one day, this emperor, this horn possessed eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth uttering great boasts. This is Antichrist. Look what it says in the next verse. This is Daniel's vision. What's Daniel's question? What is the future of Israel? And so many of his answers go way beyond Israel to the times of the Gentiles. But to Daniel, he's given this unique vision in Daniel chapter 7, starting in verse 9. You've got this Gentile madman, this Antichrist, this little horn, this dominator of the world. And then the judge shows up on the scene. The one who makes the plan. The author of the plan is introduced in Daniel chapter 7, verse 9. The one who decides who the kings are, the one who lifts up kings and topples kings, he makes his entrance in Daniel chapter 7, verse 9. And look what the God of heaven says concerning Gentile domination over Israel. He says, I kept looking, Daniel says, I kept looking until thrones were set up, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. It's one of my favorite titles for God, the Ancient of Days. And Daniel describes what he saw. He says his vesture was like white snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. This is what he saw with his human eyes. His throne was ablaze with flames. Its wheels were a burning fire. Oh, you read things like that in the book of Ezekiel. God travels on these wheels of burning fire. This is God the Father, by the way, the Ancient of Days. If you go down a few more verses, we're answering the question, where is Israel? Where does Israel shoehorn into these Gentile empires of domination? The Medo-Persians, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans. Where is Israel? Israel doesn't have a turn until the Son of Man comes back. Look what it says in Daniel 7, verse 13. Go back down to verse 13 with me. I kept looking in the night visions, Daniel says. Well, what in the world? These are flawed. I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, one like a son of man was coming. What's his name? Jesus of Nazareth, the Son of Man. I've told you 1,000 times, when Jesus speaks of himself in the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, his favorite title for himself is Son of Man. This is where he gets it. And every time Jesus says Son of Man, he's indicating that he is fully human, but he's also indicating, I am the eternal King. Because look what happens here in Daniel chapter 7. I kept looking in the night, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, one like a son of man was coming. And he came up to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. You have the Son of God and you have God the Father. The Father sitting on his throne with his flaming throne and his woolen white hair. Oh, I just can't wait to see it. And the Son of Man approaches the Father, is presented to him. In Daniel 7 verse 14, it says, this is the Father's decision. Remember, the Father writes the plan. The Father determines the boundaries of empires. The Father determines the lifespans of empires. And the Father determines that the times of the Gentiles has an end date. Because to the Son of Man, the Jew, Jesus, the Messiah, Daniel 7 verse 14 says, and to him was given by the Father, by the Ancient of Days, who has the Nebuchadnezzar Babylonian king, who has Cyrus the Persian, Alexander the Great. You've got all the great kings, emperors, Caesars of Rome. But who does God choose to lead and to rule eternally? The Son of Man, the Jew, Jesus. Until this event, all you see is Gentile domination. Until this glory, this dominion, this kingdom is given to the Son of Man, we will have Gentile domination on earth. We're still living in it. To him, the Son of Man was given dominion, glory, a kingdom, that all the peoples, not just the Greeks, not just the Romans, not just part of the European Federation, not part of anything, that all people, every nation, and men of every language might serve him, Jesus. His dominion, unlike the Babylonians and the Medo-Persians and the Greeks and the Romans, this new kingdom is an everlasting dominion which will not pass away, something new. And his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. So when Jesus comes, Messiah finally comes. When Messiah is seated as the Jewish king, the times of the Gentiles will end. Jesus will rule and never give up his rule. No one will ever challenge his rule. He will rule eternally as the King of Israel, Jesus Christ. So in Daniel chapter 2, getting back to Daniel chapter 2 so we can get back to Zechariah chapter 9 so we can go to the book of John. It's a mouthful. In Daniel chapter 2, Daniel interprets these same facts for Nebuchadnezzar. But he doesn't call him the Son of Man. He calls him something different. Look what it says in Daniel chapter 2. If these slides are messed up, yell at me. I need to circle them so I can fix them. Is this Daniel chapter 2, verse 34? Daniel is speaking to the king, Nebuchadnezzar, concerning his statue dream. And he speaks these words. He says, you continued looking at these 4 earthly kingdoms until something changed. Until a stone was cut out without hands. And it struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and crushed them. When would you expect Messiah to come back? During the times of the Babylonians? No, because that's the head. During the times of the Medo-Persians? No, because those are the arms of silver. During the times of the Greeks? Well, no, because that's a different part. The bronze part. Would you expect him to come back during the time of iron? The main emphasis of the Roman Empire on earth? No, because the Bible says he's not coming back until this empire of iron mixed with clay is in power. It would have been crazy if you'd have lived in the days of Alexander the Great to think, I think Messiah is coming. No, he's not. Read the book of Daniel. It says that he's not coming now. So you continued looking, a stone was cut out without hands, and it struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay, and it crushed them. This stone that was cut out has more authority and power than all the earthly empires, all these empires that opposed God. Make no mistake about it, all these empires were in opposition to God. Not one of these empires was in any way Christian. The Romans, the Greeks, the Medo-Persians, the Babylonians, steeped in their idolatry and their false god worship. But one day a stone will be cut. It says, then the iron, when this cut stone demolishes the statue, then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed all at the same time. All of the Gentile domination gone. For centuries, all that Gentile domination now gone at once. They were all crushed at the same time, and they became like chaff from the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away so that not a trace of them was found, but the stone. In Daniel chapter 7, he calls the stone the Son of Man. On the clouds, one like the Son of Man was presented to the Ancient of Days, and the Ancient of Days gave him a dominion that would last forever. In Daniel chapter 2, that empire, that dominion given to the Son of Man, he's called the stone here. This is the same Jesus. The stone is Jesus, the Messiah. But the stone that struck the statue became a great mountain. I tell you, that's used as an empire, a human empire. The stone that struck the statue, the Gentile statue, became a great mountain and filled the whole earth, and this was a Jewish empire, no longer Gentile. Messiah was a Jew. Messiah would be a Jew. I want to show you this verse concerning, I should have showed it to you before this slide. We've looked at this before, but it's been a long time. In other parts of the Scripture, certainly in the book of Revelation, you see this number 10 come up, this feet of clay, iron and clay that has these toes, 10 toes. Don't you have 10 toes? It specifies this more in the book of Revelation. And for centuries, maybe for for decades, I should say, probably, a lot of Christians thought that the Roman Empire would revive in Rome, and the Catholic Church is the great devil in the sky. People have shifted their views greatly from that to think Babylon has always been Satan's headquarters. It will always be until God destroys him. But there is this thing that's right now today. You can go and Google this. I've told you before. It's called the Club of Rome. And there are power brokers. Today, I would say men like George Soros and Bill Gates. And I don't know who's in this power broker. There are billionaires all over the world that we'll never know the names of. But there are power brokers that have decided that this would be a good distribution of 10 parts of the world. Isn't it interesting when they have their conversations, the number 10 always comes up. 10 groupings, 10 sections of the world. That would be easy to handle. That would be very interesting for one man to handle 10 subgroups of the world. And that's exactly what we just saw in the 10 toes. The little horn, the Antichrist, will rule the whole world. Somehow 3 of these sections, if this is the way God allows Satan to divide the earth after the rapture, somehow that little horn will defeat 3 of these sections and take them over himself, but he will rule all of it. It's just interesting, and I show you this because human thinkers are already thinking about the division of the world into 10 parts. These globalists that are running for president, I won't name any of them because I'll probably get them wrong, but there are, even on the Republican side of the ticket, globalists running for president who no doubt know what this map looks like. No matter what occurs, the rapture of the church will occur before any of these events. Make no mistake, we will be in heaven with Jesus Christ, being evaluated at the judgment seat. You have nothing to worry about. Nonetheless, that is a very real and modern and right now, today, depiction of what the rulers of the world, the kings of the earth, think this earth should look like. I wonder how things will go forward. I wonder just how far God the Holy Spirit will allow this before the Son comes back to rapture the church. We will just have to wait and see. Daniel 2 verse 45, he says this again. In Daniel 2 verse 45, inasmuch as you saw that a stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it crushed the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will take place in the future. So the dream is true, and its interpretation is trustworthy. I've told you, and you know, the king that's cut out of the mountains is King Jesus, Messiah. And that mountain, that dominion, won't take place until the millennium, until after the tribulation, the second coming of Christ, the battle of Armageddon. He will set up his kingdom in Jerusalem. He'll seat himself on the Jewish throne of David. He will be the king of Israel and the king of the world eternally. It'll never stop again. All of that information was a box that got opened in my mind when I thought about the fact that the king came to Israel. The king came to Jerusalem. And it opened up in my mind because of the question in my mind is, where is that king? What happened to Jesus? Why is he seated at the right hand of the Father? Is this part of God's plan? And then my mind shifted to the book of Daniel chapter 2, to Nebuchadnezzar's dream. That yes, God planned this all along, and he even told us that he planned this, the times of the Gentiles. So this was the promise we backed up on. I want you to go to Daniel or John chapter 12. Let's see Jesus come into his capital city. The book of Zechariah chapter 9 verse 9 says, "Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout in triumph, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming." What a great thought. He's coming. After all these centuries, 4.5 centuries, 5 centuries of Gentile domination, you can take a deep breath, Jerusalem, because Messiah the King is coming. He's just, he's endowed with salvation, he's humble, and he's mounted on a donkey, even on a colt, the foal of a donkey. Read with me from John chapter 12, verse 12. If Jesus doesn't do this, he doesn't qualify to be Messiah. He doesn't qualify to be the king that's coming. This is a prophecy. This is a promise. When your king comes, you will know him based on hundreds of Old Testament prophecies, but based on this one too. He's going to ride into Jerusalem on a donkey. And in John chapter 12, verse 12, it says, "On the next day, the large crowd who had come to the feast, when they heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem, they took branches of the palm trees and they went out to meet him. And they began to shout, Hosanna, which means, Lord, save us now. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." That is an Old Testament messianic title. That whole title you could put quotation marks around. This is a title for Messiah. He is the one who is blessed who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord is a title for the Messiah. They called him that. Your Messiah. And they also called him the King. Not only Messiah, but even the King of Israel. And then look what's stated and what's quoted here. What Old Testament verse is quoted? In verse 14 it says, Jesus, finding a young donkey, sat on it, as it is written. Where is it written? Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9. "Fear not, daughter of Zion. Behold, your king is coming, seated on a donkey's colt." There it is. Jesus walked in. Turn back to another one. Look at Matthew chapter 21. Matthew chapter 21, a couple verses longer, gives a couple of more facts. I just want to see these. Jesus did it. I just want to tell you this to leave no doubt that Jesus did exactly what Zechariah said he would do. In Matthew chapter 21, did I say 21? In Matthew chapter 21, verse 1, this is what it says. When they had approached Jerusalem, they came to Bethphage and the Mount of Olives. Then Jesus sent 2 disciples. See, Jesus leads this. Jesus knows that the king, himself, has to come into Jerusalem on a donkey. So Jesus dispatches 2 of his men to go find a donkey. Go get it. It's prepared. It's already ready. It's waiting for me. When they had approached Jerusalem, they'd come to Bethphage at the Mount of Olives. Jesus sent 2 disciples, and this is what he said to them. Go into the village opposite you. And immediately you will find a donkey tied there and a colt with her. Has to be the colt. Untie them and bring them to me. It's just like Noah's Ark, when Noah builds the ark, but God does the hard work of presenting the animals to Noah. If you read that story, the animals came to Noah. Here, Jesus knows exactly where the animals is. Creator God says, I want that colt, that foal. They're ready for me. Go get it. They're right over there in that city, as if he's God and he can know those things. If anyone says anything to you, you shall say, the Lord has need of them, and immediately he will send them. This took place to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet. What prophet? What chapter? What verse? Say to the daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming to you, gentle and mounted on a colt, on a donkey, even on a colt, the foal of a beast of burden. That's Zechariah 9:9. They're very clear. Matthew's very clear. John is very clear to say this was a prophecy about the King of Israel. Jesus is the King of Israel. The disciples went and did just as Jesus had instructed them. They brought the donkey and the colt and laid their coats on them, and he sat on the coats. They made a saddle out of these coats, a blanket, if you will, a saddle blanket. Most of the crowd spread their coats in the road, not all of them. Others were cutting branches from the trees and spreading them in the road. Anybody know what that's about, these palm branches? Why palm branches? Why Palm Sunday? Why are they cutting these branches from the trees, from the date palms there? Why the palm branches? In the Old Testament, the feast day of Sukkot, the feast day of Tabernacles, the feast day that looks forward to the millennial reign, not the millennium, but the kingdom of Messiah, was celebrated by making these booths and putting palm branches on them for walls and ceilings. For the roof, it was made out of palms. That's how these things were made. They were made out of palm branches. So picking up palm branches here is an indication of the fact that the king has arrived and we're about to enter into the kingdom with our king. We need palm branches, Sukkot. This is the fulfillment of the feast of Sukkot, of tabernacles, of booths. That's why the palm branches. So most of the crowd spread their coats in the road. Others were cutting branches from the trees. Had huge Jewish significance. And they were spreading them in the road. The crowds going ahead of him. And those who followed were shouting, Hosanna to the Son of David. The King, David's son. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. Praising God in Jesus Christ, in the person of Jesus Christ, for marching into the city that day, for bringing peace into the city, if only the city would have accepted him. One more, Luke chapter 19, and we close it down. Luke chapter 19, verse 28. I just want you to see every way that the writers of the Scripture give account of this event. It really happened. Jesus of Nazareth rode into Jerusalem on the colt of a donkey. Make no mistake, no human being can ever tell you, I'm not sure that you got the right Messiah. Nonsense. Everything the Old Testament said about this king, Jesus did. In Luke chapter 19, verse 28, after he had said these things, he was going on ahead, going up to Jerusalem. When he approached Bethphage and Bethany near the mount that is called Olivet, he sent 2 of the disciples. And he said, "Go into the village ahead of you. There as you enter, you will find a colt tied on which no one yet has ever sat." There's a new fact. This was Jesus' colt. This was the king's steed. No one had ever sat on this colt. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks you, "Why are you untying it?" you shall say, "The Lord has need of it." So those who were sent away went away and found it just as he had told them. As they were untying the colt, its owner said to them, this is not in the other accounts, "Why are you untying the colt?" And they said, "The Lord has need of it." And just as Jesus said, they allowed the colt to go. They brought it to Jesus, and they threw their coats on the colt, and they put Jesus on it. As he was going, they were spreading their coats on the road. As soon as he was approaching near the descent of the Mount of Olives, the whole crowd of the disciples began to praise God joyfully with a loud voice for all the miracles which they had seen. I love all these extra details. And this is what that crowd was shouting as they are praising God. "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest." Zechariah 9 says that he will come on a donkey. He is just, endowed with salvation, humble. And that's exactly who Jesus was when he approached Jerusalem. He was the King of Israel. He was Messiah. He was the Lord who came in the name of the Lord. He was the sent one, the Messiah, Mashiach. And Israel had a big choice to make, as I've said, and you know the remnant said, "You are our King. You are the Son of David. You are the Son of Man. You are the Lord. You are Messiah, the one who comes in the name of the Lord." And they honored him as such, but the bulk of Jerusalem said, "You're not the one." But that doesn't take away from the fact that Jesus fulfilled the Scripture perfectly. He rode in on that donkey. Let's close in prayer. Father,